Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fell Football Podcast, the third of our NFL draft preview shows. Just a reminder, we are now available on YouTube as well as Spotify. So if you're listening on Spotify, nothing will change. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see all the visuals, etc. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Kyle Lindemann, NFL draft analyst and fantasy football analyst at Roto Baller. Kyle, great to have you on. How's it going?
Oh man, 8 days away. I'm so excited. I'm just, it's good. It's busy though. It's like, this is kind of our final little sprint here. If you're doing, NFL content creation and, we're obviously lucky to do this, no complaints, but, it's pretty much a full sprint from the time training camp starts, like through the NFL draft. I mean, May and June is really probably the only time I really take off. So not that I'm complaining, but this is the last little stretch run here, so real feel prepared and excited, but just kind of going over maybe some day three guys just so I'm a little bit more prepared next weekend.
Yeah, and it's possibly the most exciting stretch, really, of the whole off season. The draft, the final build up, things start to come a little bit more concrete. People are submitting their final mocks. It just gets a
Right.
little bit real at the moment.
Yeah, I've got to
And
submit mine for the competitions by uh Wednesday of next week at 11:59 Eastern
nice.
time.
How's it looking?
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I mean, last year I had 27 of the 31 guys who went in round one correct. It was just a lot of the landing spots were flipped. It was like I had Tyree Wilson, I think, going to the Falcons, and then he went like one pick later or one pick before to the Raiders. And so it was like, man, I was so close. And so, but it's fun.
It's already feeling like a bit of a tough year to call. I think there's maybe one or two that we know. I mean, maybe
I
Jaden
feel
Hurts.
pretty good about the first eight picks. I just think it's going to come down to if somebody trades up, like
Yeah.
what does New England do? I'm curious. Are they with if they decide they're like, hey, we want to move back, are we going to get more for number three on draft night, or would we get maybe more ahead of time? Like, remember a couple of years ago, we saw the 49ers trade up to number three like a couple weeks before the draft. So, um, and I want to say when Washington did it at number two for Robert Griffin the third back in 2012, they did it like a month before the draft.
Yeah, I
So,
think it was. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to chat everything at quarterback today. And the structure of the top of the draft is slowly taking shape, but the sort of murkiness of the quarterbacks are providing a few doubts here and there. Kyle, should we start with Caleb Williams then? I mean, the overwhelming favorite to be drafted at number one by the Chicago Bears. I guess my thing with Caleb is, do you think the Bears really had a decision to make here? There was a lot of talk about them maybe trading down and keeping Fields and sort of accumulating some picks, or with a talent like Caleb Williams, is that just too much to pass up? And especially because they can reset the rookie QB timer of 5 years.
yeah, I mean, I look at it like both ways. Like they can reset their timeline. They got a quarterback on a rookie deal. I think he'll be like 9 million against the cap for the next 4 years. And the problem with Fields was, and I'm an Ohio State guy, so I was rooting for Fields, but I felt like he didn't show enough. And it's like a year from now, then you got to decide whether you want to pay this guy. Like they would have had to decide if they were going to pick up his fifth year option. I mean, it's just a whole can of worms. Caleb Williams to me feels like he's been the number one pick for 2 years. Ever since I saw this guy at the end of his freshman year at Oklahoma, I was like, holy smokes, like this guy does things that you just don't see. And so to me, it's a no-brainer. It's Caleb Williams. I'm not saying he's a perfect prospect by any means, but I feel like people don't realize like this guy didn't exactly have the best supporting cast around him at USC. I mean, who from USC's offense is getting drafted this year? No one on day
Brendan
one, no one on day
Rice,
two. Yeah,
maybe.
maybe. Yeah, Taj Boyd. Um, I mean, nobody on the offensive line, and he had Jordan Addison last year, but that was it. I mean, we tend to think of USC like the mighty Pete Carroll Trojans with Reggie Bush and those guys, but like, no offense to USC fans, but like they've really kind of fallen off. Like they're not the same juggernaut that we want to think that they are. So I think Caleb like really had to put that team on his back. Like the defense was terrible. I mean, he had to score 40 points pretty much every week to win. So I think sometimes they're like, oh, he goes for the home run and he doesn't take the short stuff. And I'm like, well, kind of the same problem that Drake May had. Like
Yeah.
he's literally carrying this entire offense.
Let's move on then to what I guess is sort of considered the tier two of the quarterbacks in this draft, or you can argue maybe it's 1A, 1B. Drake May and Jaden Daniels. From what I see around the league, I think most analysts, avid draft watchers, film watchers, they have May as number two ahead of Jaden Daniels. That's just mainly the consensus that I've seen. Big arm, physically gifted, good on the move, and Jaden possessed a lot of those qualities as well, obviously. What do you think NFL teams see? I mean, particularly, I suppose, the Commanders who are picking it too and could take Daniels or May. What do you think they see in Daniels that makes them more inclined to pick him over Drake May?
Well, he's more of a dual threat. I mean, May can pick stuff up with his legs. He's good at throwing on the run. He's good at extending the play. But I mean, he's not the athlete that Jaden Daniels is. I mean, Jaden Daniels can just fly. He's not like as twitchy as like a Lamar Jackson, but he's probably the most recent guy that we could compare him to in terms of like being able, and he's probably a better passer than Lamar was at this point in their college career. But obviously he's not as twitchy as Lamar, but like he's such a dual threat in that essence that like this guy can take off and run for 50 yards. I mean, he's consistently beating defensive backs to the corner on tape, which is very impressive for a quarterback. I think maybe that I mean age doesn't really matter for quarterbacks. I don't think because they well, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter as much because these guys play so long. Like I would obviously take like a 21-year-old running back over like a 23-year-old running back, but like when we're talking about quarterbacks, a little bit different. I think maybe with Daniels, he just doesn't have the biggest frame. I don't know how much more weight and mass he can really put on himself. I think he's like 6'3", 205, something like that. So I do question maybe some of the durability. He had a tendency to like run right at guys and not slide,
He took some
which
massive hits, some
yeah, I think
huge
it
hits
was,
last year.
Nate Tice from the Athletic and Yahoo. He's like, my NFL comp for Jaden Daniels is Johnny Knoxville because this guy doesn't
Yeah,
protect his body. And I was like,
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, it's close. I've got May ahead, but not by much. I mean, I could see why people would go either way. Obviously, with Daniels, you got the dual threat. I just think maybe my question is like, is he a little bit more maxed out as a prospect because of his age? And he probably got to play with two of the top four wide receivers in the draft. I mean, I think Brian Thomas is probably going to be wide receiver four off the board. Malik Neighbors obviously was in the top three. I'm not knocking Daniels for that. I think my concern with Daniels was he doesn't go through his progressions as well. Like he kind of just, if he doesn't see his first read and he gets pressure, he just tends to bail and he takes off, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you, as a quarterback, that was kind of our thing with Justin Fields was he's not going back and processing and going through his reads. He sees pressure, his first guy isn't open, he takes off, which, like I said, is not bad, but it's not sustainable for like a long-term NFL career. You can do that for the first couple of years you're in the league, but you have to be able to develop. Once a team pays you big money, they're not going to want you. I guess maybe Josh Allen's the exception, but like Josh Allen's what, 6'6", 250 pounds, where Daniels obviously isn't that big. So I just think once teams pay you, like they don't want their, if they're paying you $300 million, like they don't want their quarterback like running out of the pocket all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And after those two, we have the man knocking on the door to potentially be ahead of one of those guys, JJ McCarthy, undoubtedly the biggest riser in the whole draft process so far. Was probably seen as a late first, maybe even early second round, sort of January, February time, and is
That's where
now,
I'd have him.
yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree with that, but now he's frequently being mocked in the top 5, top 10, top 15 range, and people are speculating he's not going to get past maybe the Giants at 6 unless someone trades up. So you've got a late first, early second round grading him. What sort of traits do you think that he has or that he's shown at Michigan that would translate well into the NFL from college that would make teams take him as high as the top 10?
Well, I would say one is the intangibles. Like this guy's just a leader on and off the field. when he enrolled at Michigan, he wasn't even at Michigan. He was texting other recruits. This was a story that Dane Brugler of the Athletic told. JJ was texting other recruits and saying, "Hey, like if you're coming to Michigan to party, or if you're coming to get girls, like don't come. Like I'm coming to Michigan because I want to win. Like we're gonna put Michigan on the map. Like don't come to school if you don't want to win." And like this guy has like all the intangibles. Like he's just a complete film rat. He's a gym rat. He would go to the park down the street from where he grew up, and I want to say he grew up outside of Chicago, and he's at the park at 6 a.m. throwing at like barrels of hay because he's working on his accuracy. Um, and he actually was a hockey player growing up, switched to football, I want to say in about eighth or ninth grade, and he has all the intangibles. He's got the size, he's 6'3". I want to say he weighed in at like 217, which is pretty good. He's got a pretty good arm, and he's really smart, and he can make a lot of those tough, like tight window throws that sometimes I don't know if you can always teach that. Like I think he's fearless, but at the same time, as much as he's fearless, like he'll take the easy 7 yard completion if you give it to him. Like nobody did that better in this class than McCarthy. I think the question is like we just had a limited body of work. Like he really didn't do a whole lot against Penn State. Didn't really. I mean, he had a couple of nice throws against Ohio State, but he wasn't dropping back. This guy wasn't dropping back 40 times a game. He was, going 15 to 20 for 200 yards and a touchdown because Michigan's defense was so good and they had two really good running backs, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. So, but we can probably make the same argument for Roman Wilson, their wide receiver. I think he was actually a really good prospect. He just didn't have gaudy receiving stats because Jim Harbaugh and them, they didn't really need to throw it because the rest of their team was so good.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think his numbers, I think on third down, on the money downs in the money positions, they're also pretty great. And I think that's definitely something that obviously a lot of evaluators on in the front
Yeah,
office
his
take into.
conversion rate was close to like 50%. And I actually caught a little bit of heat for that on Twitter because I made a graph of quarterback conversions on third down, and I used this website, cfbstats.com, and I charted all the conversions, and I had McCarthy's conversion rate at like 66%. And then so I was like, whatever. And I was posting it and tweeting it. And then I got a message from someone. They're like, dude, your graph's not right. You need to go back and look. And I went back and look, and CFB Stats like updated their website and didn't tell me. And
Oh,
then it went to 48%, which was still the highest, but it wasn't like
yeah, still not
way
bad.
off the charts. Um, so that always stinks. So gotta be careful what resources you bank on out there.
Yeah, I've probably been spreading that as propaganda around everywhere, incorrect the whole time. But I mean, no, I mean, 48% is still the best in out of the guys coming out, and it's still good. So
Mm-hmm.
after McCarthy, then we've got two quarterbacks, I would say, next up for me, who have had very differing careers, but are both obviously entering the league at the same point. Bo Nix, who's been obviously a 5 year college starter, and then Michael Penix Jr., who was obviously fantastic at Washington last year. Do you have a preference between the two, and which one do you think will go on to have the better career?
Oh man. I think Penix has the higher ceiling, but I think Nix has the higher floor.
Yeah,
I think my issue with Nix is just questioning the ceiling, feeling like he's maxed out. Like I feel like he can succeed in the NFL if he has a good supporting cast around him. I don't think him or Penix are the kind of guy that's gonna, carry put an offense on their back like I think Caleb Williams could. So I think they're both going to be situation dependent. To a degree, I think every rookie quarterback is situation dependent. To a degree, I think with Penix he's such a deep vertical passer that NFL defenses have kind of changed the way they play defense, the last 2 years, which they're kind of playing a soft shell, too high safety coverage, just not wanting you to beat them over the top, because NFL defenses with, in unison with analytics and basically said like, hey, the worst thing we can do as a defense is give up an explosive play or a long touchdown. Like we need to limit explosive plays. Penix is not going to outthrow coverage in the NFL like he did at Washington. He's not going to have Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, but he does just, man, he can just flick it. And it just really comes out of his hand. He's got one of the best arms I've ever seen live. So I think with Penix, he's just got to have a good supporting cast around him. But we kind of saw in the Michigan game when he gets pressure and his receivers kind of gets knocked off his routes and they mess up the timing. He's got to step up in the pocket, maybe go left, try to extend the play. Not really what he does. This guy's really a rhythm passer. When you kind of get him like off kilter, he kind of gets out of rhythm. But when he's in rhythm, whew, he can really, really, really put the ball in there.
All right. So do you have in your prospect, have you got like a quarterback tier list? Do you have a like so between the
Yeah, I
two
mean,
you'd
I would
have
say, I've got Caleb in tier one, and I would say May and Daniels are tier two.
yeah,
Tier three for me would be McCarthy, Penix, and Nix. But I get why McCarthy would go in
yeah,
the first round. There's always going to be a little bit of inflation, usually about half a round for quarterbacks because it all comes down to supply and demand. Like we look at the 2021 and 2022 quarterback classes, only two of the quarterbacks drafted in each of those classes combined are starting in the NFL right now, Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy. So we had 2 years of quarterback classes get wiped out. So that's only going to drive up demand. I mean, look at what Minnesota's done. I mean, Minnesota kind of has to come out of the draft with a quarterback here. Otherwise, everyone else is going to be like, well, why the hell did you trade your second round pick in 2025? Now you don't have a quarterback and you don't have your second round pick next year. That's not going to be a good look for Minnesota. So, I mean, they've kind of backed themselves into a corner. I get why they've done it, and I kind of commend them for, you know, embracing the unknown. But like Minnesota's got to come away with the quarterback here. So whether Denver or the Raiders take one in round one is the greater question, or do they maybe trade back up and then at 27 or 29 or something like that?
yeah. I think trading back for both those teams or and taking quarterback is way more favorable than trading up to 8 or 9 or
Yeah,
even standing pat and taking one. I don't think you could really take Knicks or Penix at 12 or 13. I get the McCarthy top 10 stuff just because there's a little bit more you can work with for age as well. And
right.
there's sort of more sort of with his intangibles, like you
Yeah,
said.
and I get that with Knicks and Penix. These guys are going to be 24.
Yeah.
McCarthy just turned 21, so you look at it, you feel like, okay, we're kind of projecting how this guy could be at the next level. Not saying he's a slam dunk. I think if McCarthy goes to the Vikings, I'll be in. I'll be like, oh man, like I'm so excited. If he goes to the Giants or if he goes somewhere else, I'll be a little hesitant because I'm not
Yeah.
as convinced that he'll do well without good receivers there. But
Yeah.
we'll see, right?
Yeah. I really don't understand the Giant stuff at all, to be honest. I don't obviously I know Daniel Jones coming off that brutal injury and he was pretty bad last year, but Amazon out at the end of this year. So in terms of timeline, it does make sense, but I just think they have other areas that are a lot worse than their quarterback room
Yeah,
right now.
they're kind of on an interesting timeline because they're in year
Mm,
three, right? The Giants did it in reverse. They almost should have been bat. Year two should have been their year one, and year one should have been
yeah,
their year two, where they kind of went up and they're down, and then it was like, okay, we don't know what these guys are. Minnesota kind of did it a little bit too. Um, it's like it's almost bad to be too good as a head coach right away, right? Because you
yeah,
they raised those expectations, and the team really
yeah.
wasn't that good, and they kind of took advantage of their schedule. And yeah, the Giants are in a weird spot. There's no doubt about it.
Finish off then, just from the other guys who are getting in the class this year. So Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler. Are there any other guys that you sort of like the look of in maybe in the later rounds?
Yeah, I would say Devin Leary from Kentucky. He's going to be 25, but this guy's got a live arm. Um, I believe he was at North Carolina State, and I kind of liked what he did there. And like he ended up transferring to Kentucky for a variety of reasons. But I thought he looked really good at the combine. Thought he looked really good in throwing drills. Like I said, he's going to be 25. But I think if there was a quarterback you maybe want to roll the dice on, like end of round five, round six, he would definitely be the guy that I would be interested in for sure.
All right, very nice. There we go. And those are the quarterback evaluations with Kyle Lindemann. Okay, then we are moving on to the mock draft segment of the show. Kyle, we haven't actually decided this. Do you want odds or evens?
Let's do. I'll go evens. I'll let you go first.
All right, then I will start off with obviously we're doing no trades as well, so we'll just keep it nice and simple, even though there probably will be one or two into the top 10 perhaps. Start off nice and easy. Bears get their franchise passer, Caleb Williams.
I think it's pretty clear what Washington's doing. I mean, they traded away Sam Howell. They got a new GM, new owner, new head coach. They want to turn the page. We talk all the time about the importance of synergy in the NFL. You got to have all those pieces on the same page. So I'm going to say, despite some of the smoke, I think it's going to be Drake May for the Commanders at 2.
Interesting, very interesting. We've moved down to the Patriots then, and I think if the board fell like this, they might look at trading out. I don't know. I feel like they sort of get that sense of them, but we will just sort of keep it. You can see it. It's already in there on the simulator. We will take Jaden Daniels. We spoke on earlier in the pod, dual threat, a little bit on undersized maybe as a QB, but I do think that he will go on to have a very good NFL career. Jaden Daniels for the Patriots at number 3.
Yeah, I mean, I even if they end up trading the pick, I think it'll be a quarterback. I would be surprised if New England took Harrison, even though
Yeah.
you can make the case for it. I just don't think that that's what they're going to do. For Arizona Cardinals, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, I feel like we've been mocking this for 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's just the slam dunk pick for them. I know there's talk of them trading out as well, but I feel like if the board falls like this and Harrison Jr.'s there at number 4, I don't really see
Right.
how they could turn it down. Interesting spot. The Chargers are in here. I think tackle. I think Joe Alt could be in play if they were picking it here. I'm going to go Malik Neighbors though. I just think, I mean, their receiver room is either Quentin Johnston or Josh Palmer as receiver one. Obviously, they lost Keenan Allen and Mike
Right.
Williams. Desperately need weapons for Justin Herbert.
And I think the Giants are in the same boat. Like they need a true number one receiver. They got too many undersized slot guys. Roma Dunze here. I feel like there's a pretty big tier break after a Dunze, so only makes sense for the Giants.
From Medunze to the Giants. The Titans at number 7, then I'm going to do the very basic pick of Joe Alt. They've obviously let Andre Dillard go, and their line play last year was pretty abysmal. They need to get Will Levis, another guy blocking, so go Joe Alt.
Yeah, 8. I'm gonna go Dallas Turner, outside linebacker edge from Alabama. He's versatile. He's good against the run, and I mean, it feels like the Falcons haven't had a bona fide pass rusher in forever. And he's actually a really good scheme fit with what Raheem Morris likes to do because he likes to sometimes drop his edge guys back into coverage as to kind of disguise, the coverage. So he fits really well with what Turner fits really well with what they do.
Awesome. The Bears at 9. I think this is definitely another trade back slot potentially. They could go a number of positions here. They could also take a tackle, could go for an edge guy. Brock Bowers is intriguing. I think they met with him earlier on this month. I'm gonna go with Brock Bowers. I think that would be a really, if they got Caleb Williams and Brock Bowers out of the draft, I think they'd be pretty happy with that.
That would be interesting. Yeah, I think he would be in play with the for the Jets, but given that they're where they're at, I'm gonna go with Troy Fontenot, tackle from Washington. Now they do have Tyron Smith, and I believe they signed Morgan Moses,
Yeah.
but Fontenot can play inside. He could play guard easily. And to be honest, like they're going to need a succession plan from Tyron Smith eventually. I mean, we don't even. I mean, he's more than likely not going to play a full season. He hasn't played a full season in like 5 years. So I think the Jets are definitely going to go offense to kind of appease Rodgers.
Yeah, I guess the Rogers sort of clock is very quickly running out for the Jets. Obviously, he's coming off a very brutal injury, so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. The Vikings then at 11, I'm going to do what I think they will probably trade up to do, which is draft JJ McCarthy. Spoke about how he fits really well into the Kevin O'Connell offense, and I think yeah, if they do trade up to 5, it wouldn't surprise me to take JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Now the Broncos here at 12, this has been the hardest team to mock for because they just have so many needs. They can just do
Yeah.
so many different things. Garrett Balls, the left tackles in the last year of his contract, I believe
Yep.
he's 32. So is he someone they're going to extend? Are they going to bring him back? I think they need to start getting the pieces in place so they can figure out their quarterback in 2025. So I'm going to go with JC Latham, tackle from Alabama,
JC
who's
Latham, very good in
probably
the
the strongest player in the draft.
yeah, and he excels in the running game as well, which is what I imagine Denver will try and implement next year. The Raiders then at 13. They could go a few ways here. They could go O-line. They could probably go maybe D-line, but I'm gonna go my CB1, which is Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. Obviously, we saw his blazing speed at the
Yeah.
combine. Hella athletic, just all-round dog at CB.
Yeah, Saints at 14. I'm going to go left tackle Olu Fashanu. Ryan Ramczyk, the right tackle, might miss the season. Why is his name slipping my mind? There's a guy that they took 2 years ago in the first round from, I think it was like Northern Iowa. Why his name is slipping my mind, but he hasn't. Trevor Penning.
Trevor
He
Penning,
hasn't.
yeah.
He hasn't lived up to potential. And I think the Saints are just kind of in win now mode. Like they need to get an immediate starter. So I just think Fashanu makes too much sense.
Yeah, I agree. That's a common. I don't think Ryan Ramchik's going to play, is he? I think that a lot of the chatter is that he's probably going to be missing the year or potentially retiring, which would obviously not be
Mm-hmm.
great. Colts, they could definitely use a receiver, and maybe Brian Thomas Jr. could be in play here, but gonna go with I'm gonna go Terry Arnold. I do think that GM Chris Ballard maybe just favors the kind of athletic CBs, and I think their room right now is not great. There's not many good players on
Yeah.
there, so I think it's Juju Brents and name the other guy
Right.
back there escapes me. But yeah, they've re-signed a lot of players this year.
Kenny Moore.
Kenny Moore, yeah, obviously, of course, they
So
re-signed
for
him.
yeah, Seattle, I'm gonna go with Leatu Latu just because I feel like they don't have a true edge rusher, and that's kind of a spot that I feel like they need. I could see them going interior offensive line as well.
Yep, the Jags. I'm gonna go with Brian Thomas Jr. I think I obviously they were quite big on bringing back Calvin Ridley. He went
Yeah,
to the division rivals
I
Tennessee,
like that
so
pick.
I think yeah they've got kind of a lot of guys in the same sort of mold. Obviously, they brought in Gabe Davis as well. It's not a massively inspiring receiver room. I do think they need some sort of extreme pace in
Hmm.
there, and Brian Thomas Jr. can provide that.
Yeah, 18. I had been mocking offensive line to the Bengals, but they made some moves in free agency. They did, they brought in Trent Brown. Could they potentially, draft a tackle who could play guard and slide him over? They lost their starting defensive tackle. Why is his name? He went to the Lions. Why is his name slipping my mind? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Um,
not BJ, not B, DJ Reader.
yeah, they lost DJ Reader. So I think Byron Murphy here makes a lot of sense for the Bengals, defensive tackle from Texas.
Yeah, I think they signed because they've got BJ Hill. They signed Sheldon Rankins, but they are very thin on the D line. Rams at 19. This is a tricky one. Again, a team that's sort of a little bit lacking on defense in terms of maybe like superstar status. They've lost Aaron Donald, obviously. He's retired. So let's give him Johnny Newton, a guy sort of who can fill the Aaron Donald sized void on the D line.
Yeah, for sure. Steelers here at 20. They kind of do need a left tackle, but I think they potentially need a center. And I'm actually
Mhm.
going to go with Graham Barton from Duke. This guy can actually play all five spots on the
Yeah.
offensive line. Most of the scouts kind of have him pegged as a center, but he's just kind of a true blue collar guy. I just feel like he's someone the Steelers would really, really like.
Yeah, and the Dolphins at 21, then I am going to take Jared Verse. Obviously, Dolphins have got Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. They're both coming back off big injuries. I think they could
Mhm.
definitely use another guy in that room to help, really shore it up.
Definitely. I think the Eagles, they've got Darius Slay, but I believe he's 33. And why the all these names are slipping my mind. They got another guy, the guy that got flagged for holding or in the Super Bowl. He's 30 or 31, and I think their secondary was just really bad at the end of the second half of last year. They need to get some youth, so I'm going to go Cooper DeJean from Iowa.
Yeah, he had a pretty
Oh,
good pro day the other
James
day.
Bradbury, that's who it
James
was.
Bradbury, yeah. No, and Dejean he's a bit of a versatile guy in back there, so he can maybe. I think they've got three guys out of contract within the next couple of years in the secondary. So, and the
Mhm.
Eagles obviously love to plan ahead. They do everything sort of a year in advance.
Mhm.
Vikings end their second pick, which they may or may not have on draft night, remains to be seen. Um, this is an interesting one. I'm gonna go Vikings. Yeah, who could they use? Let's go.
I say
Hmm.
defense
Yeah, I'm
or
thinking they.
interior offensive line.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on Jackson Powers Johnson. Yeah. I've heard there's murmurs of him maybe dropping out the first round, so I don't think he's going to go as high as we thought, although he would fit the bill. Yeah, this is tough. I'm gonna say I'm thinking about their corners, and
I
I
like that.
think
I like that fit because um, defensive
let's go
coordinator
Kool-Aid.
Brian Flores likes to blitz. Kool-Aid's kind of more of a hand fighter on the edge.
Hmm,
Now he did disappoint a little bit. He was kind of everyone's cornerback one heading into the season. I
yeah,
think Arnold kind of lapped him or passed him halfway through the year, but no, he would be a really good fit with Minnesota, Dallas here. I'm gonna go with Taliesin Fuaga, tackle from Oregon State. There's been a lot of talk. Maybe he's not agile enough to play tackle. Maybe he's better as a guard. But Dallas just needs someone who can play immediately. So I think that makes too
yeah.
much sense.
Yeah, and with the Packers at 25, I think there's definitely a few ways they can go here, but I'm going to go Nate Wiggins. Well, we know Brian Gutekunst loves drafting corners, athletic corners, so we'll give another one into their room there.
So 26, Tampa Bay. Scroll down just a smidge to see who else is available.
I think I know who you're looking for, maybe.
So this one is tough because the bones of this team are good. They've got some expensive pieces. They kind of kept their core in place. Hard to tell exactly what they would do, but Shaq Barrett is gone. They haven't had that same kind of pop off the edge. So I'm actually gonna go with Chop Robinson from Penn State. This guy, he only had I think 11 sacks in college, but he's just got such an explosive first
Yeah.
step that he plays such a premium position. I feel like he's the kind of guy that teams would maybe want to take a chance on.
Yeah, I think he only had 3 sacks last year, right? So I think he's
Mm-hmm.
definitely coming off a less productive year, but yeah, his explosive as hell. So yeah, I would not be surprised to see him in the first round at all. Cardinals then, they sort of need numbers. They need a few more guys. I'm trying to think where I've got them on my actual current mock. Let's go with you know what? Let's go Kamara Lassiter. They could use another corner. I mean, they could use a lot of positions. They're very thin on the line as well, but they definitely need more corners. And Lassiter is a bit of a dog, so we'll go with him.
I think people are going to be disappointed if the Bills don't get a receiver here. Can you show what receivers are available? I think everyone except the top four, right?
Yep.
So I'm actually going to go Lad McConkey, and I think the
Nice.
Bills just need someone who can step in and kind of catch passes from Josh Allen, who's got a little bit of a versatile skill set. This guy can line up in so many different spots, so it would create an interesting dynamic with Kincaid.
Yeah, he's really fun to watch. He's been one of my favorite players to watch in the process so far, and he could play. I know people think he's like a slot guy, but he's really good on the outside as well. Um, Lions at 29. The guy I'm looking for is Darius Robinson out of Mizzou. I think this is like a Dan Campbell guy. and just
So he
purely,
actually grew. So he actually grew up just outside of Detroit. He grew up as a Lions
yeah.
fan.
And I think
So
I remember seeing a quote from, I think it was a
yeah,
quote from him that said something like they had a good visit, or something like that. Yeah, I can just see him as a Dan Campbell kind of guy. So yeah, we'll go with
for
Darius
sure.
Robinson.
I'm gonna go Amarius Mims here. Now, people maybe were expecting him to go a little bit higher. He'd be the perfect fit for the Ravens. I wouldn't say this guy's raw. He's just inexperienced. Only started 8 games in college, but he's just a physical specimen, like one of the biggest we've ever seen. So I'll be surprised if he's actually still here at 30. But
Me too.
yeah, Mims has got a high ceiling.
Yeah. The guy I'm looking for next is not even, bit of a shocker here. The 49ers, who have been heavily linked with Rosengarten in the recent weeks, they desperately need to buff up their O line. It wasn't
Yeah,
great at all
he's
last
been
year.
rising because I remember
Yeah.
him a couple months back, and they were looking at him as like a fifth or sixth round pick, and he's really rising. Washington's offensive line was awesome, so
Yeah.
that wouldn't shock me. To close out the end of round one, we're gonna go Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver from Texas. I just think the Chiefs, even though they have Rashid Rice, he's kind of more of a yak guy who catches at the line of scrimmage, where Adonai Mitchell's, even though they got Hollywood Brown, they only got him on a 1 year deal. So Adonai Mitchell's a really, really vertical kind of X receiver they can put on the outside.
I'd be surprised if both the Bills and the Chiefs didn't go receiver. I think the Chiefs maybe depending on Rashid Rice. Obviously, there's sort of a bit of an issue there, legal issues.
Yeah,
But
Brandon Bean is the Chiefs have a good culture, so they're kind of willing to take chances on some of these guys. I'm not saying AD Mitchell is a bad kid or anything like that. He just had a tendency to take some plays off sometimes on tape. Wasn't
yeah,
always consistent. So I don't he doesn't strike me so much as like a guy Brandon Bean's gonna want.
or Brett,
Um
or are you talking Bills or Chiefs?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But
Yeah,
whereas
yeah,
the Chiefs, I think the Chiefs are a little bit more willing to like
yeah.
take a
Oh,
chance on
yeah,
that guy because they're like, hey, he's just gonna, meld into our culture, so to
yeah,
speak. I do like that Darius Robinson pick to the Lions, man. I that makes a lot of sense. I think that might actually have that in my mock.
yeah. I think I've got this bottom four potentially as in mine as well. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But that is our mock alternating picks. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Kyle, thank you very much for joining me. It's been great having you on.
Yeah, it was fun, man. Enjoy the draft. I know it'll be a little later in the day for you. You gonna
Yeah.
stay up or are you just gonna watch it the next morning?
No, yeah, I'll stay up. I stay up for the game. So the draft is just another, another late night basically. Yeah.
Wow.
But
Yeah, I remember real quick, I was stationed in Okinawa my first 2 years in the Marine Corps. That was like 17 hours ahead, man. So I'd be watching Sunday football on like Monday morning, and that was
yeah.
that was interesting.
No, yeah, it's pretty testing at times, but it's always worth it. And especially, I love going to the London games too. It's great that we get to actually see some games in the flesh
Hmm.
too.
Right.
But yeah, Carl, great having you on. And everyone else, thank you for listening. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us all that good jazz. Thank you and goodbye.